Hey everyone, welcome to this analytical explainer designed specifically for your CSS 2027 and PMS current and Pakistan affairs preparation. If you're aiming to construct a top-tier, really nuanced essay for your exams, well, you're in exactly the right place. We're going to take some pretty complex historical and political data and break it all down visually. That way, you walk away with a crystal clear, highly analytical framework. Okay, let's jump right into it. Now, today's high-level academic discussion is heavily informed by the insights and the structured curriculum of instructor Zoheb Ahmed Anjum. He's a highly regarded civil service examination mentor, and having this kind of expert foundation is absolutely crucial. It ensures your arguments aren't just, loose opinions, but are actually grounded in rigorous exam-ready analysis. So, here's the exact question we're tackling today. Discuss whether Pakistan's constitutional evolution reflects a struggle for democratic deepening or a cycle of centralization and rollback. To really nail this, we're going to use a dialectical framework. Basically, we'll look at the thesis for democracy, then the antithesis of centralization, and finally, we'll synthesize the two. This is exactly how you build a compelling answer for CSS and PMS.
All right, here's our roadmap. Number 1, historical patterns. 2, evidence of democratic deepening. 3, cycles of centralization. 4, the dual-track reality. And finally, number 5, an unstable equilibrium.
Okay, Section 1, Historical Patterns, Mapping the Foundations of Constitutional Change. Let's get into it.
Let's start by looking at the very bedrock of the state's legal framework. What's literally wild about this timeline is just how fast the foundation shifted. As scholar G.W. Chaudhry points out, Pakistan's three main constitutions from 1956, 1962, and 1973, they aren't just minor legal updates. They reflect this constant, restless shifting of balances. We're talking dramatic swings between parliamentary and presidential systems, and this massive tug-of-war between federalism and centralization. So right off the bat, we see this isn't a straight line of progress at all. It's a history of foundational instability. And that shifting foundation builds into two very distinct historical patterns. On one hand, you've got what historian Aisha Jalal calls constitutional engineering by military rulers. We see constitutions repeatedly amended or even completely replaced to legitimize rule and heavily centralize power. But then, flip the coin. As Saeed Shafkat highlights, civilian periods are almost entirely focused on reversing that exact centralization. They aim to restore parliamentary supremacy and grant more provincial autonomy. It's a persistent pendulum swing between two totally different visions of statecraft.
Section 2, Evidence of Democratic Deepening, the Thesis for Progressive Reform.
So, let's first argue the thesis, right? The idea that Pakistan's history genuinely reflects a struggle for deepening its democratic roots. What's our evidence? Well, there are massive legislative milestones we can point to. The absolute biggest one is the 18th Amendment, which systematically reversed those authoritarian-era changes and pushed significant power down to the provinces. Plus, organizations like International IDEA note a continuous effort to strengthen the Election Commission to secure better electoral integrity. And of course, we can't ignore the courts. Scholar Osama Sadiq points out that periods of judicial activism have actually expanded fundamental rights, providing these crucial checks on executive overreach. To put a bow on this thesis, the International Crisis Group summarizes it perfectly. They state, the 18th Amendment reversed many authoritarian-era changes, strengthened parliament, and devolved powers, reflecting a broad political consensus for democratic deepening. Honestly, dropping a quote like this in your essays is absolute gold. It firmly anchors your argument that there is a legitimate, consensual drive toward democracy in the country's history. Moving on to Section 3, Cycles of Centralization, the Antithesis and Rollback. All right, we've seen the thesis. Now, to keep our analysis objective for the exam, we have to look at the antithesis. Because if there's a struggle for democracy, there is an equally powerful cycle of rollback. Just look at the repeated use of Article 58 2B type powers. As G.W. Chaudhry documents, these were mechanisms that allowed presidents to literally just dismiss elected parliaments unilaterally, completely short-circuiting the democratic process. And hey, this isn't just ancient history. As Dr. Ishrat Hussain points out, even today we hear periodic calls to revisit or dilute the 18th Amendment, especially when it comes to controlling fiscal resources and natural wealth. The pressure to re-centralize is always there. But we have to ask, why does this centralization keep happening? Scholar Aisha Sadiqa provides a massive puzzle piece here.
She notes, national security concerns, especially regarding India, terrorism, and internal insurgencies, have been used to justify centralization of authority in the federal government and security establishment. This is a vital nuance for your arguments. Centralization isn't always framed publicly as a simple power grab. Rather, it's frequently justified through the very real lens of existential national security imperatives. Section 4. The dual-track reality. The interplay of competing forces. Okay, so we've seen the thesis, and we've examined the antithesis. How do these opposing forces actually interact in the real world? Well, scholar Mohammed Wasim calls this the dual-track evolution. You can clearly see the tension on the slide. On track 1, you have genuine, hard-fought efforts at devolution and strengthening civilian institutions. But running right alongside it and constantly colliding with it are these centralizing impulses. And here's the kicker. It's not just the military driving centralization. It's also driven by the short-term interests of political elites and by state responses to huge external shocks, like wars or major economic crises. These two tracks are just in constant grinding tension. And this is where the waters get really muddy. Scholar Ali Riaz points out that political parties themselves play this dual role. They'll loudly champion democratic norms when they're in the opposition, sure, but they often suddenly support centralization once they're in power if it suits their immediate interests. Furthermore, Aisha Jalal shows how external shocks act as major catalysts. A crisis hits, the state rapidly centralizes power to survive the shock. But once the dust settles, that centralized power is usually only partially rolled back by the next civilian government. So over time, the center of gravity keeps slowly shifting. Section 5. An unstable equilibrium, characterizing Pakistan's trajectory. All right, we need to bring all of this together into a really tight, highly academic conclusion for your CSS essay. If you want to impress the examiner, you need a synthesis that captures the whole debate. Dr. Ishrat Hussain provides the absolute perfect phrasing for this. Pakistan's constitutional evolution is best understood as a contested process in which democratic deepening and centralization repeatedly clash, producing a hybrid and unstable equilibrium. Think about that. It's not a linear march toward perfect democracy, and it's not a pure regression into total authoritarianism. It is exactly that, a constantly shifting, hybrid, unstable equilibrium. So what actually dictates the future of this unstable equilibrium? Moving forward, Pakistan's constitutional trajectory relies entirely on a really complex balancing act between four main pillars. You have the strength and competence of civilian institutions, the overarching influence of the military, the ongoing push for provincial autonomy, and honestly, perhaps most importantly, the growing public demand for accountable governance. Whichever of these variables gets stronger or weaker is what's going to pull the Constitution in its direction. Which brings us to our final thought. As you wrap up your prep, I want you to ask yourself, based on the current events unfolding around us right now, will the power balance tilt this unstable equilibrium toward permanent democratic deepening, or are we witnessing the triggers for yet another cycle of centralization? Take this analytical framework we've just built, apply it to today's headlines, and I promise you'll be ready to write an exceptional CSS or PMS essay. Keep studying hard, keep questioning the obvious, and I will catch you in the next explainer.